everyone. Welcome to Accidental Zodiac. I am your host, CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac, astrologer at large, with my friends here, William Holloway and Spencer Michaud, both astrologers. Maybe I will let both of you introduce yourselves, starting with Spencer.
Hello. Hi, friends. My name is Spencer Michaud. I'm a astrologer from Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I have a YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology, and do readings for people and try to be telling stories. I'm a storyteller as well as a Hellenistic astrologer who utilizes multiple divination systems, including the tarot and the I Ching.
And you, for people everyone should know that your website is a wealth of information. You have one of my favorite lectures on the decans and the tarot up on your YouTube. Is that correct?
Yep, I have a few lectures up there. I've got a introduction to the decans or the faces, and a fixed star lecture, kind of getting people primed for studying the fixed stars. I'm also doing a webinar series with the different decans of individual signs. So next one's coming up on January the 15th, the decans of Capricorn. So you can find information on signing up for that at my website, spencermichaud.com.
Awesome. And you can also get the back ones as well.
That's right. There's the ones, if you've missed anything from Virgo forward, there's a store up to be able to purchase those back ones.
Awesome. And I should say, which I didn't say, I'm really bad at these introductions, mostly because I feel put on the spot, because I feel like these are casual conversations. And then I feel this need to have a big introduction. It looks like I'm staring at myself, but I'm actually staring at you too. We are here talking today about Venus retrograde. So I'll drop that before introducing our next astrologer and friend, William Holloway. If you want to share a little bit about your practice, William.
Yeah. So I'm William Holloway, astrologer based in Baltimore. I'm mostly found on Instagram at the moment, william.stanley.holloway. Long name, but so yeah, that's probably the best way to find me for readings. Currently doing readings though.
Awesome. And you are a little, okay, you're coming back. You were a little pixelated for a moment.
Oh no.
And I want to know, we're both reporting from basements. So I'm always curious to know if it's you or me. So if I go blurry.
You've been fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Venus retrograde.
Yeah.
Maybe let's just jump in it with how's everyone's feelings?
Go ahead.
Let's see. We're right in the middle of it, right?
Almost. We're like, it goes. We have the Kazemi on Saturday, right? Yeah. So that's like marks the halfway through the 40-day journey.
It feels like we're in the middle of it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Everyone I know is gone.
Oh, yeah. Go on.
Oh, no. We just talked about this before because I know so many people are like the whole like very typical, stereotypical Venus retrograde, ex-lovers, old friends, people coming back into your life. I feel like that's the story that I've been getting from a lot of people. It feels like it's been a very emotionally confusing time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I know you and I have talked about that a little bit, William, but like maybe that's a question for you, Spencer, like just general Venus retrograde vibes from your maybe not necessarily personally, but from your clients. What are some of the biggest themes coming up for you this?
Yeah, I think everyone's going to feel it in a little bit of a different space in their chart.
Sure.
I think that the way that I've seen my clients and my family and my own personal experience, just a lot of reviewing of our values around the way that we organize the fundamental structures of our lives. I think that, from my personal experience, I've been reorganizing my office to meet the priorities of where I'm at in this moment now, not based on some past thing that might not be bringing me vitality. This is extended to like reorganizing my schedule, the way that I organize my business, the way that I organize my refrigerator. So I mean, it's really a complete like overhaul of the support systems of our life, the skeletal support systems of our life. And I think that some of the things you can see also is there may be some delays around some of the Venusian things that we normally would expect to be, bonded and harmonized.
Sure.
But that's a normal retrograde signification too. And we're getting really close to the Kazemi moment which means the planet is going to be reborn in the furnace or the heart of the sun on the 9th. So we're getting really close to a period of time where the things that we're administrating, which is a Capricorn 3 signification,
Yep.
is we were shown a lot of the buried corruption that maybe keeps us from harmonizing things. And as we review the ways that we govern,
Yeah.
we are going back to the second decan of Capricorn, where we may have to change the entire blueprint.
Yeah.
We can't really manage something if the actual plan that we have is flawed. So I think it's going back to make a new plan so that we can more smoothly manage all the different responsibilities that we have.
So to recap, for those who might be watching this in the future, we're discussing the Venus retrograde in Capricorn, late 2021, early 2022. And it's interesting, you mentioned it's stationed at what? Do you remember its degree it's stationed at? Venus stationed at
26, right?
Yeah.
25, 26.
So it's stationed right next to Pluto. So I thought it was interesting that you mentioned like having to sort of, what was the word you used? Right, like having to deal with the Capricorn 3 decan, right? Like having to be faced with that. So if you could pull up the card again too.
Yes, the four of Pentacles.
Yeah, and I thought that was sort of, there was this extra signification with the Four of Pentacles having with that happening with that Pluto conjunction. And I'm wondering maybe if you could speak to that. Both of you, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, William, do you have thoughts on Four of Pentacles? I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, well, it's a interesting card because I think a lot of people, when they look at it, they think about like someone hoarding wealth, like a rich person hoarding wealth. But I think of it's more like you kind of come this far. Like it's like you've worked really hard for all these things. So it's like, yeah, I'm holding on to this because I worked for it.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of my take on that. My initial take on that card when I think of it.
And now going back into the Pluto-Venus conversation happening in that decan, could we say that it's perhaps this sort of reevaluation of what we've worked so hard for, right? What was the word you used? Roadblock, Spencer, thinking about the experience of that in that decan and then going back to the blueprint.
Yeah, one of the things I've been studying lately with the tarot is the relationship of the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, either if you think about it from a traditional Jewish perspective or from the Kabbalistic, the Hermetic tradition as well. And I've been doing this exercise where we compare two cards each day that mimics sort of the release of slavery of the Hebrews from Egypt. And this card is associated with the Sephira called Hesed. All the fours in the tarot are associated with this kind of energetic ideal or center, or it's sort of related to like a chakra. This Hesed would be related to I believe the right hip area of the body that would correspond with the tree of life.
Yeah.
And Hesed is sort of like this energy of limitlessness and loving kindness and like the flow of the universe or the flow of the Tao. And one of the things that this author that I've been studying, Mark Horn, in the book Tarot and the Gates of Light, is talking about is the Four of Pentacles, because we're working with Hesed in the material world, may be about holding on a little bit too tightly or potentially even blocking the flow, the universal flow. So there's kind of some themes of like, are you holding on too tightly to form when, the real energy and the real gift of Hesed is maybe essence. So
Yes.
I think that we may be having to reevaluate with Venus retrograde. Are we the forms that we're pouring our dreams into, that we're pouring our hopes into, our values into, because Capricorn in general is really concerned with, building the fundamental material structures of our life and descending from spirit, like that was liberated in Sagittarius,
Sure.
into the concretization of matter in Capricorn.
So, question for both of you, bring this full circle. I keep thinking about, again, that's where this Venus retrograde started, with this conjunction with Pluto, and thinking about perhaps this onslaught for those who are experiencing maybe like a blast from the past, whether it be old friends, lovers, etc. Right? Like this is we're kind of the first part of this retrograde. It was to really sort of face our connections, maybe places where we unconsciously even have been holding on to. Right? So it's a really like where it's coming forth so we can clean house, right? Like I think of Pluto, like something coming up that we're supposed to be faced with, so perhaps let go of. And then coming back now after the Cazimi to the second decan, where we have the Three of Pentacles, thinking about that as being, I guess I'm explaining this, and the question is to elaborate on this. But now going back to the second decan of the Three of Pentacles, now from that sort of clean space, we can then start to create the new blueprint. Would you agree with that? Elaborate on that, or
Yeah. It's like I was talking about this the other day. I know somebody who is having a situation at work where they got offered a new position, but right before Venus retrograded. And now they're in this limbo where like the position, they've been hired, but the position is being restructured because they were like, we have to go back. We realize all of a sudden now that this might entail more work. We might need to split this into two things. So it's like this whole thing. And I've seen that with clients. I've seen that with people, like this like restructuring. There's like a lot of plans that went into place are now being kind of like scaled back. I mean, we're seeing that in a lot of ways, like, two steps forward, one step back, or whatever. Like, there's a lot of that. We're seeing it everywhere. Like, here's the plan. Wait, never mind. Let's revise it again. Let's come back and revise it again. It's like the same story every week. I feel like we're all kind of seeing that.
I think the keyword is upending that comes to mind.
Yeah, I agree 100%, William. I've seen almost exactly the same thing with clients and family members, where people inherited maybe a new responsibility and are trying to wrap their head around how they're dealing with the new form that they're trying to manage. And I think that one of the things Venus retrograde can do is create some polarization with authority figures as well, because we have the governing hierarchical bureaucratic system in Capricorn 3. So there may be some conflicts that we're experiencing that normally are smoothed over by Venus with authority figures or with the bureaucratic structures of our life. I know that this has been something we've been going through in my family with either working from home or coming into the office, and like there was a lot of red tape that was having to be navigated through as like Omicron started getting more intense. And there was a lot of stress around that in the beginning, and a lot of conversations that needed to be had that were reevaluating what all of the agreements were between everyone. So I think that that's another thing, is reevaluating our agreements and our commitments. And that's not always fun. That's I think especially in Capricorn, we're having to come to terms with the reality principle of what we're dealing with, not what we wish it was, what the reality of our present moment is, and how are we going to respond in that, in the most, I don't know, functional way possible, right?
Right.
I like what you said about reality, because I think it's important to remember that like Venus retrograde in Scorpio feels a lot different than perhaps Venus retrograde in Pisces or Capricorn. And the fact that this is a transit that happened, the last time Venus was retrograde in Capricorn was 8 years ago. So it's this sort of every 8-year check that we have on reality. And I think keeping that in mind is important.
Yeah.
Let me see. We have, as I'm turning over to this. Let's see. So, okay. So the other thing I have on my list is, so we kind of went over the general vibe of how we're sort of feeling this Venus Capricorn. If you could sum it up in one word, what would it be thus far?
William?
Or two words.
Rework, something, restructure, rework, redo, revise.
Yeah.
Rebuild.
I like
Rebuild.
I like the restructure. I like the restructure part, because I think that imagine, I almost think of it like this. This is what's coming up in my brain when you ask that question.
Sure.
Imagine that you've been doing things in a certain way and you accidentally break your arm or you break your leg. And I think that this could be, Capricorn and Saturn in general rules the skeletal system and the bones.
Yeah.
And, when we have a planet like Venus retrograding with the contact with Pluto, it's sort of like a bone has gotten broken and we need to reset it and make sure that it heals back up so that we can start moving forward again. Because without that skeletal structure, we don't have the support systems that allow the rest of our body to function or to move. So it really is a fundamental, that's another thing, one word I would call it, fundamental, is what are the foundations and the fundamental parts of your life that you're re-examining right now, and how are they affecting the Libra and the Taurus area of your chart as well, because Venus is the clay that is providing significations for those other two signs as well.
The first thing that came to mind when you said that was that if you don't take the time to set a bone properly, it will still set just wrong. And thinking about like really taking this transit to heart and like really thinking about the structures that we're making, because we might find out 8 years from now that we've been walking, that we have a broken leg again because we never let it set right.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, that made me think of, like if you hurt your knee and you don't do anything about it, you start walking different, and then the rest of your body starts being off. Everything starts to kind of follow suit if that's not addressed properly,
Oh, and Capricorn also rules the knees, so it's very
That's right.
apt for metaphor for what we're dealing with here. So, and those joints of our life, they're the things that propel us forward. And I love how you're pointing out that all of this is connected to all the other systems of our life. And if one part of our unified body is not, I don't know, lubricated properly or like hasn't healed in the right way, you're going to walk with a limp, or you're going to create a compensating issue in another part of your body. You might create inflammation in your hip, or you may, I don't know, the other leg might start to be a little bit off because of the compensation. So I think that another signification of both Venus and Saturn is balance. And I think that if we're thinking about how we're restructuring our lives, we have to find out how are we going to come into equilibrium. And that takes a lot of humility. Like, this is a humbling sign, Capricorn is. I mean, it's sort of associated with almost like voluntarily going into a cave or into what feels like a prison on some level. So we may feel the limitations of our reality coming into play, and that can be painful sometimes. I think that's the other thing that I think you can experience with this is Capricorn is that lowest point in the solar journey. So it's where almost like the darkest days, right? And there is some kind of hope that comes in of redemption. There's all sorts of myths about redeemers that are born on the winter solstice. So if we bring in some of those stories and mythologies, this is the time where, we may be having hope for some kind of redemption, but since we've got Venus retrograde, it's just taking longer, and we're having to say, well, do we really trust this particular, guide? It's something like that. I mean, the guide could be anything. It could be the animating principle that moves us forward, right? So I think it's a good time to ask yourself questions about how do you take responsibility in your life, and how can you create space so that when when the shit really hits the fan, right? When your life starts to get really busy again, do you have the right support structures in place so that you can just kind of act on instinct rather than like worrying that the vehicle that is moving you forward is going to work or not? Like maybe you have a broken, I don't know, axle or something right now. Like,
Yeah.
and if you're, maybe it's like there's a little crack in it, but you want to get that fixed, or because if you hit a bump or something and you're on a long trip, it's going to slow you down. So I think that's another way to think about it. Also, I actually was doing some thinking I Ching wise about this Venus retrograde, and I got a hexagram. It was number 9 with no changing lines. It's basically restrained. In the I Ching talks about dense clouds but no rain. So it's kind of like this feeling where we've got all the elements for building our structures, our castles, our dreams, but
Yeah.
there's some element in place that we haven't quite put the right puzzle piece together yet, that we
Okay.
have to go back and figure out, oh, okay, maybe there's I don't know, some kind of gunk in the gears that we've got to remove first before we can, really make that push.
Do you have a response, William?
Oh no.
So,
Nodding.
well, now I have a question. So maybe to recap, because I know we just we just jumped in talking about how we felt about this Venus retrograde and then getting some of the nittier, like going into some of the significations of what it means for Venus to go retrograde in Capricorn. But maybe for those who are listening and then don't know, like maybe we can point out maybe how we can see in an individual chart how this will play out. So for instance, you start off, Spencer, saying this has been a important time for you to really restructure the maybe routines of your life, right? And I know that it's happening in your 6th house. It's also happening in my 6th house, right? So this is the nuances of this are going to feel different for everyone depending on where this is happening. For some of us, it might be our relationship to our partner or our careers or our children. William, I can't remember because I'm terrible at this. What house is Capricorn for you?
9th house.
Okay. And so we touched on this a little bit, if you don't mind sharing, but it feels like this
yeah.
maybe is shifting some of your belief systems, right? So that's
Yeah.
another thing, layer to this.
Yeah, I was telling you guys yesterday that like, and I thought it was funny only because it was so Venus retrograde 9th house. I was just like passing thought of like, I don't know that I believe that anything happened. I think when we die, we're just gone, and that's not how I normally believe. I have a whole belief system that I've always had, but it was just kind of a passing thought that I felt very strongly about, where I was just like, I don't think there is anything after we die. And I was like totally okay with it. But then also thought it was funny because I was like, well, that's such a Venus, belief systems question. But yeah, I mean, in other ways too, I've thought a lot about my relationship to a lot of things when it comes to like philosophy around the way I live. I've definitely been thinking a lot about choices I make that might, like, we're talking about if one thing isn't working, then the rest of the thing, So I have been thinking about like, what am I doing possibly that might be connecting something that might be connected to something that might be dragging me down in this way, just kind of like looking at that. But that's also because I have Libra 6th house. So, so yeah, also like rearranging my office, getting new throw pillows, like throwing out pillows, and being like, these pillows aren't firm enough. That's probably more my Taurus rising, but so yeah, all of these things, like, yeah.
So that's something that to point out that people at home, if this is maybe new to you, right? So really thinking about not only where Capricorn is in your chart, but thinking about, as Spencer mentioned before, and you just did, William, thinking about where Libra and Taurus are in your chart as well. Those are the houses Venus rules, and how those significations are all sort of interacting with each other. Again, astrology being one big web. I do have something sort of, sorry, before I carry on, anything to add to that?
I think one last thing I'll add to that is that I really like the idea that I heard from a really great Hellenistic astrologer named Martin Hermes, where he talks about the planet in the house being the potter, and
Yep.
the planet that is the host of that planet being the clay. So in this case, you're going to have Venus being the potter in your Capricorn house.
Yeah.
It's also the clay of your Libra and your Taurus house. Does that make sense? So the quality of clay for those particular houses is potentially a little bit challenged right now. We also think about what significations is Venus drawing upon beyond just the tarot that we've talked about. Well, it's Saturn, and Saturn is in the second decan of Uranus. I'm sorry, squared to Uranus. Okay, but it's in the second decan of Aquarius, and yeah, now I'm embarrassed. But that's it's an interesting place for Saturn because that is about moving on from the past and communicating between the fringe and the center. So there may be some communications between, you know, you and people in positions of power and authority that need to happen to be able to move forward and to restructure your life. And of course, Saturn is separating from that square to Uranus. So there has probably been some tension in regards to that and how we have been organizing the resources that we need to build the blueprint, right, that we're going to be seeing at the Cazimi moment at 18 degrees of Capricorn. So I really like that metaphor of clay versus potter, and the planet is going to play different roles. It's in some ways it's the potter, and in other ways it's the clay. So it's trying to hold that multiplicity all at once. That is kind of the art of astrology and seeing all those multifaceted layers.
So to recap, right now, Venus in Capricorn. So Venus is the potter, but then it's providing the clay for our Libra and Taurus houses. And so right. Because Venus in Capricorn can be quite difficult, especially going retrograde, it might mean that we have some difficult clay to work with in that part of our life as well. And so in short, one word I might use for this transit, this retrograde process, right? 40 days and 40 nights wandering the desolation of our Capricorn terrain is frustrating.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that word?
Yeah.
And I say that because it really, it draws into another question I want to ask for you specifically, Spencer, but I would love for William to get your I'd love your feelings on this as well. But you described, so we have this happening right now, Venus retrograde in Capricorn, of course, Saturn in Aquarius, but at the same time, Jupiter just went into Pisces. And I remember, Spencer, you once described the first decan of Pisces as also having that sort of frustrating feeling. And so I'm trying to like build a picture, because on one hand we're like, okay, like, but Jupiter's in Pisces. How would you describe that frustration? Maybe build on this for me.
Yeah, I think there's two things that come to mind with that. First of all is that when Jupiter separates from Saturn, it was providing benefits to Saturn and sort of softening some of maybe the isolation that we had been feeling, or the giving us hope within the limits that we had set for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And then when Jupiter moves out of Aquarius and into Pisces, so those two planets are not witnessing each other anymore. They have a quality called aversion. So I don't know, would you like me to show you on the chart?
Sure, please. That'd be wonderful.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up the chart just so people can get a visual on this. Can you see my the movement of my mouse?
Let me see. Yep. Yes.
Okay. So here you can see Saturn. All right. Saturn's now alone with Mercury, but without the assistance of Jupiter. Jupiter is moved into a sign right directly next to Saturn. And when they were together, like a few days, I don't know, prior, like let's say we go back a month, you can see that they were together. Yep. Right? And Jupiter was in the same house and they were witnessing one another. That means that they had an open line of communication to one another. And now they don't. Now they have almost separate agendas on some level. And that's Jupiter tends to be more about, you know, creating through freedom, through liberation, through vision. And Saturn is saying, well, what is the reality principle? So when you got those two planets not communicating with one another, you've got a Saturnian blueprint that Jupiter is trying to beget from. I guess that's the word I would use. In mythology, they call Jupiter the demiurge, right? Who was the architect that was building from the blueprint that Saturn was providing. And when Saturn and Jupiter were together, that blueprint, Jupiter could build from the blueprint that Saturn was providing. But now that they're separate, Jupiter doesn't have, like, they're like, well, what are we building from? You know, and there's some confusion around that. The last time we had Jupiter moving into Pisces, we were at the point in the pandemic where, we were coming into the summer and people were like, oh, I've been so good for so long, right? Now it's just time to just do everything again. No limits, no masks anymore. And of course, at that point, we weren't really right about that. And exactly when Jupiter went into Pisces again, we had some new guidelines from various organizations like the CDC, where they're like, oh, well, you don't have to quarantine for 10 days. It's only 5 days. And so a release of limitations. And we've seen the results of that, where, we had 1,000 new cases a million new cases of COVID yesterday in the United States. So, and we have a new variant that's, I don't know how many times more transmissible. So there's almost alternate realities that people are living in now, depending on whether they're subscribing to Saturn's rules or Jupiter's at this point. And what you were talking about with Jupiter in the first decan of Pisces.
Yeah.
This is the 8 of Cups.
I'm just grabbing it too.
And this is a Saturn ruled decan. So each 10-degree section of the zodiac has its own planetary ruler. So what we're seeing is Saturn within Jupiter's house. And I think that one of the things that I see with Jupiter here is that before Jupiter can bring us inspiration, right? Which I think is part of what its job is in Pisces, is like, what is your dream? You need to feel a sense of dissatisfaction with where you're currently at. And I think that that's part of the first 10 degrees of Jupiter in Pisces is, feeling like you're lost a little bit, and like that the material reality that you were building isn't bringing you the satisfaction and the spiritual awakening or whatever that you were hoping for through that. And I think that this is kind of another signification of, trying to figure out what to do when Jupiter's going through Pisces, and of Capricorn in general, because that's another thing with this card. Realizing that you can't build your spiritual tower to the divine through material means. And I think that that's something that I've really been trying to think long and hard about during this retrograde, is the way that I'm managing my material reality or my business actually a reflection of my spiritual values? Or is it just the grind that is, moving me forward towards maybe greater material prosperity, but spiritual poverty? So I think that that's something where we're having to find a balance. I'm not of the opinion that material reality is all bad. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that the danger is just only pursuing one at the expense of the other. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Lisa.
So you laid out a little bit of this. Now we've extended from the Venus retrograde story to the conversation we're now having with Jupiter, which is again part of it, because Jupiter was with Saturn, who of course is ruling Capricorn, right? So these stories are interconnected. Now Jupiter's gone to Pisces. And it is a little bit frustrating because this first decan is ruled by Saturn. So we're having to think a little bit about what it is. What was the word you used? I keep saying like what we want to like let go of. That's the first thing that comes to mind. over and over because I'm staring at the card. But I know, William, you've talked a lot about this, about your thoughts, and maybe this is a good time to slip into sort of some of the mundane ramifications of this transit. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on Jupiter and Pisces.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking about that, how like when it went into Pisces the last time, and mask mandates were lifted, and there was a sense that there was this freedom feeling. So I think everyone thought, or at least a lot of astrologers thought, that when it went into Pisces again, that the virus was going to cease to exist, and or that was going to be the freedom, right? But really, I think what's happening is like there's this, we were given permission, right? Like we were given permission to be free. We were told it's okay to not wear masks. Now we're being told that we only have to quarantine for 5 days. Well, is that really for our benefit, or that's the benefit of businesses, right? Of the economy. So we have to be careful when we go forward. If we're being given permission to be free, who's giving us permission? And does that always mean that we have to take it? And we have to, or we have to govern ourselves, I mean, I think that might be a lesson there, is that like, well, just because I can doesn't mean I should,
Well, and William, I'll add to that we've got Venus retrograding through the decan that is associated with governing. And when it was conjoined Pluto. So maybe these actions that we're seeing of like freedom may be, in response or maybe initiated by a corrupt system that is actually does not necessarily care about the health and well-being of the community, but more about their bottom line. And maybe they are the ones that are trying to build that temple to wherever they're going through material means, and not without spiritual consciousness being infused within it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of the movie Don't Look Up, which we had talked about.
Yeah.
That felt very, I mean, it goes along with those themes, right?
Oh yeah. It was such a great movie for this moment, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good time to, well, do you want to jump into that? I kind of wanted to read, to wrap this up, I did want to read a quote because I thought that was interesting by Nick Dagan-Best, because I was reading his article on Venus retrograde in the synodic cycle that came out, I believe, end of last year. So it's pretty recent. And I thought this is maybe bringing in the whole Jupiter-Venus story. So to quote Nick Dagan-Best, Venus represents social consensus, the accepted norms that most citizens can agree on. The Venus retrograde transit, occurring once every 19 months for a duration of about 40 to 42 days, marks a time when this consensus comes up for review. New standards are set as outdated values are reformed. Behavior that might be taboo for one generation is advocated by the next. Global society leaves 2021 with some understanding of what it means to adopt a new normal, but who can say how anyone might react to the newer normal 2022 has in store?
So CV, just a small example of this.
Yeah.
That's an awesome quote. Nick Dagan-Best he's amazing. Check out his work, everyone, because he's really one of the geniuses of our craft here. Just being able to reevaluate old values that we agree on, and like maybe how slow we are to adapt the values that actually are necessary to meet the moment. Does that make sense? To meet the moment. And if we're using these old and outdated procedures or hierarchical structures or blueprints, as we've been talking about,
sure,
that's not meeting the moment, and that's what creates the corruption. We've been going through this in my household with the work from home versus going into the office type of thing, and there was a lot of stress in our house about that particular issue, because the structures in place were willing to wait. They had to go through all the red tape before that they would agree to do a lot of this stuff. Oh, we'll have a meeting about that in 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, the reality of our situation now is that this virus is exploding now, and 2 weeks might have been too late. So there's been a lot of like disharmony and butting heads around that. Ultimately, it's worked out okay for us personally, but I'm sure that many people are making these, trying to have these types of conversations and having difficulty, especially with kids like going to school and things like that. In our area, they've taken kids out of school for 2 weeks and made them virtual again. And we're thinking about how do we support people through this really challenging time. I saw something on the Instagram today from a restaurant that I really, really love in Chicago. It's called Uncommon Ground. It's a place that used to play Jeff Buckley tribute concerts. It's one of my favorite places, right by Wrigley Field in Chicago. And they were just talking about, hey, if we're really struggling right now, like if you want to come get carry out, like you may be helping to save our business so that we don't go bankrupt, and I'm just thinking about how many people out there are making these really difficult decisions about how to move forward with the structures of their life. And I would hope that we wouldn't just leave people we wouldn't leave people financially in the dust like these restaurants, but also that we wouldn't leave people to have to make really difficult decisions with their health too, so that they get, we're giving them a false choice. Does that make sense? We're making them choose between their health and their business going bankrupt. And there's got to be a third thing that we create around that.
Totally. I just keep thinking, coming back to maybe to paraphrase what you said in the beginning, that our structures, reality has outpaced our structures. And I feel like you see this even with the structures we thought we created in 2020 with this pandemic that's ever changing, right? So now we're like, wait, quarantine 10 days, but now it's 5 days. But then this virus is keeping us on our toes constantly. So like we can't even keep up with this structure, like you said, to the point where now people like we're not having shutdowns, but then people have to risk getting sick, right? So it's been this constant like trying to chase reality.
Mm-hmm.
Would you go on?
Yeah, go ahead. And William, I'm toss it to you if you have more thoughts here.
Well, yeah. I was going to talk about a little bit, just kind of reiterate the kind of the how the bureaucratic, we need that third option, right? Because bureaucracy is all about taking as long as possible to get anything accomplished. And we're in a moment where we can't have that. And so it's not working, right? Everything takes forever to be decided, and we can't be taking forever to be making decisions. So yeah, it's all of that is being kind of like highlighted right now, that these things need to work better. Like we need to be able to mobilize faster. We should not be in a situation where there are absolutely nowhere to get tests to get, for to get COVID tests. Mm-hmm. And the president shouldn't be saying, just Google it, right? Like, because you Google it, you're like, that's not helping. Like, that's not the point. Okay. So
I think that feels like a little bit of the Jupiter and Pisces is some factions of society have just like thrown their hands up and like, oh, well, I guess everyone's just going to get COVID. And that's acceptable for some people, but for me, it's not. So I it's very frustrating. And this decan of Jupiter, or this decan of that Jupiter is in, it's also called the Labyrinth by Austin Coppock, where we may not be able to see where exactly we're going. I think the real fact of the matter that I'm keep coming back to is that nobody really has a 100% like authority on the truth. If someone tries to tell you they know exactly how this is all going, they're wrong because it's changing. And the ultimate hubris is saying, well, we know for sure what this is all about. And the humility, the Hod, right, which is the Sephira of humility, of surrender, is sometimes saying, you know what? We don't know, and that's okay. We just have to be present and meet the moment that we need to respond to, right? And I think that what we're seeing and what we're expressing his frustration, and also that movie was expressing, was the lack of response from the people in power that may be able to make changes on a sweeping scale, and the frustration that some people may feel as individuals living within that system, if that makes sense, right? I don't know if you're all are feeling that as well.
100%.
So we are, I guess, is actually the thought that comes to mind to sort of sum up this part of the conversation, thinking about this transit, is learning to be nimble. Would you agree with that? Like, that's the thought that how I'm summarizing this. But maybe transitioning here, it's a good point to talk about the movie Don't Look Up. I watched it on the request of both of you last night. And yeah, one of you jump in.
Well, tell us your thoughts, CV. What did you think? Let's get your just watched it reaction.
Well, I was thinking about it, and it was interesting because I was thinking about it in terms of the Venus retrograde, right? Like, so because that's where my head was at. And I was just thinking about how there was just like, I mean, it really did sort of express the to me, like the breadth of Venus, right? So you had the like little love affairs, the confusion, right? The like on like the very like personal level, but then you even had this idea of like, what do I really care for? Rather, like having to make decisions, not whether it be like my family or money versus humanity, right? And so there were all these sort of larger tropes that came up.
Well, and let's bring people up to date on this without too many spoilers. This movie is it's basically about a very large asteroid that is discovered by a team of scientists that is on a collision course with the Earth, and is basically going to destroy the entire planet if people don't do anything within the next 6 months. And these poor scientists are trying to talk to the president, who was played very deftly by what was it, Meryl Streep?
Yeah.
And kind of maybe a reflection of the past administration. And going on these like talk shows, and people are kind of like marginalizing the scientific opinion and things like that. And I was reading that this movie was supposed to be a commentary on on climate change, on the dangers of ignoring some of the warning signs around that. But it really has turned into, it also reflects the pandemic response, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of existential crises that go on in this movie, from the scientists to the people in power, to going from one point in the movie, like trying to divert this, disaster, to like trying to, mine it for money, like to what is the word I'm looking for? Monetize it, right?
Which feels very Venus and Capricorn to me too.
Right,
Because I think of Capricorn, I think of Saturn, like mining, right? So
right. So instead of saving humanity, they're like, oh well, let's figure out how we can profit from this at the peril of humanity. And that's exactly what we're facing right now as a collective. Is, oh well, how can we profit from this, rather than like how can we actually keep people the safest that they can be. And it was so powerful. I think some of the most powerful moments was just the complete meltdowns from some of the scientists, where they were just speaking, I think, a lot of the frustration of people who maybe can observe some of the bigger patterns of this, that people just aren't listening, that it feels like we're so distracted by trivial things, whether it's something from our phone or social media, or from trying to profit from whatever we're doing, that we're losing touch with what really matters, like just life itself. Like it's an extreme example with like the whole Earth is going to blow up. But I think that sometimes we need to be shaken out of our lethargy, or our, I don't know, our blindness, by an extreme example to what we're dealing with in our present. And I don't know about all of you, and I'm feeling emotional about this now, just channeling all the emotions of that movie. I really thought at the beginning of the pandemic that if something like this would come up, that we would band together as like a species for the sake of one another. And I'll tell you what, I've been so utterly disappointed in like how selfish that various factions of the world or the system have been. And it's just, man, it really bothers me. And that's not everyone. There are definitely good people out there who really do care about other people and have taken communal actions. But overall, it's like I was watching that movie with the sadness of like if there was literally a giant asteroid that was going to hit the planet, that's exactly how people would react, and it's fucking sad, you know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what else to say about that, you know.
It's interesting. The first thing that came to my mind. I'm sorry, William. Do you want to?
Oh no, I was the only thing I had to add to that is a friend of mine saw it after she saw it. And I don't want to give away the ending, but she said
it's so amazing and weird. Can we just kind of?
We can kind. I mean,
it's unexpected. It's very Avatar to me.
Oh, the very, very end, right? Because that movies don't ever just end at the credits anymore. You have to wait because But Hollywood likes to do that. But a friend of mine that when it was over, she was like, "I'm really pissed off at the ending of that movie because they didn't leave us with an exit strategy." Because it's so real feeling. You're like, well, what am I supposed to do now? You like that's kind of it's like, well, that's the point, right? Like maybe that is the point. We can't look to the people that are supposed to protect us to always protect us, right? Like sometimes we have to do all we can do to protect ourselves. Not trying to sound like doomsday or anything, but you know what I mean? Like it's if we put too much into trusting and hoping, and again it's that balance, right? Because you don't want to go too far and then be conspiracy theory, because that's how this all started. That's how we get all these conspiracy theories, is the distrust. I'm not saying that to trust, but it's like everyone's thinking about themselves, right? And we all are. I mean, everyone from the top to the bottom. So and we're seeing a lot of selfish behavior, and and unfortunately, the pandemic kind of just shined the light that we, have a lot more work to do, and it's going to take a lot worse, unfortunately, to wake people up. I mean, it woke some people up, but some people, it woke them up, and then they took a weird direction and went the wrong way, right? It's like, it's like, oh, I'm enlightened. It's like, oh, you don't, okay, and then you're like, wait, where are you going? You're like running towards the fire instead of away from it. You know what I mean? It's
it's interesting. I think of one of the significations of Saturn being fear. Mm-hmm. And if we're thinking about this movie where suddenly the whole right, I mean, I think whether you realize it or not, if you hear a giant asteroid is coming towards Earth and it's going to kill us, right? Like I would imagine most people somewhere there is a fear response. Now, whether the next step is to ignore that, right? And just pretend like that doesn't exist or lean into it. There's a level of fear there. And I keep thinking about, not to get too much into like pandemic conversation, but in some ways, one of the byproducts of this pandemic has truly been fear, right? Like I think about the larger response of governments, corporations, and some of that behavior. But then I also think about like how much courage it just takes to be afraid for yourself, but then also to still be compassionate, right, for your families and your friends, right, and be there for them. I keep thinking about people who are now treating like everyone in their life like a leper, right? Like if they're like like your family member gets it and you're suddenly like, don't be near me. Like there's a level of like caution, but then also how do we still have compassion without letting this fear eat all of us?
Balance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, CV, one of the things that came up in my brain when you were talking about that is, what if we look at it almost on a completely meta level?
Yeah.
And seeing that movie may be a metaphor for the inevitability that we all actually will have to face, is that we're mortal, and that, maybe we won't die in 6 months, but we're going to die. And like, this is something that, you know, William's been going through with his ninth house retrograde here. And I think the real question, if we look at it from the bright side and we look at what can we do with the knowledge that we are mortal and that this is not permanent. Well, there was some great lessons, without too many spoilers, in that movie, with the people that were really asking themselves that question. Is they loved each other, you know, and they practiced being, you know, with present for one another on some level. Now that's a little bit difficult with like the pandemic, and there's many ways to be with people if you're not just completely in their physical presence. I've had to learn that over the course of my life. But I think that's the bright side takeaway is, with the knowledge of your own death, how are you going to choose to spend that time? And that's something that we all should ask ourselves, you know, just for the rest of our lives, because a lot of times we feel invincible, and maybe getting some awareness of our own death can actually let us live a little bit and let us like feel, I don't know, appreciation and gratitude for what we are living.
William?
Oh yeah, I agree. You know, I mean, it ties into, you know, the more positive thing that you can take out of Venus retrograde in Capricorn is like the value. Like, what is it that we actually value? Period. Right?
I almost think of it getting like kind of sort of a parallel to your meta, or getting with your meta. I don't know, censor where this fits in, but thinking about, right, like if we could think about this Venus retrograde specifically in Capricorn as almost being like a giant meteor, right? Like, this is the thing in each of our lives. Like, this discomfort is here to remind us of something. Like, that's the beauty of astrology, right? Like, it's not there just to like, right, cause unrelenting suffering. But I feel that in a sense, like, this movie's a great analogy for Venus retrograde and whole, right? So this idea that somewhere in our chart, we're feeling some discomfort, we're feeling a little fear. And how can we lean into that to face the problem, to ultimately come on the other side?
Yeah. Right. I think that people in modern society, like Western society, they want to, there's two thoughts I have on fear. There's people that try to use it as a weapon against people. And there's also some of it that is a little bit healthy around self-preservation. So I don't think fear itself is bad. I think that if we try to think of fear as like, never be afraid of anything, that's the ultimate spiritual bypassing. Sometimes fear has a function, just like all the other emotions have a function. A tiny bit of healthy fear is good for self-preservation. If you feel a little bit like, oh, my adrenaline's coming up, I'm going to get hit by this car, I better run out of the way. That's a healthy fear. So I think that, again, you know, as William was pointing out, it's all about balance and temperance. When you go to the extreme where fear makes you completely paralyzed, that you can't do anything and that there's no hope left, that's when fear becomes toxic. And when you go, you know, to the other extreme where you don't have any fear and you just live your life like you're invincible, that's equally as toxic. So how can you utilize a healthy amount of fear and hope at the same time to be able to live a balanced human life? You know, I think that some of the other things that I think about when people are thinking about their own death is, you know, living for the next life. And that's honestly, like, I'm with William on this. That's not something that I'm trying to do. I'm not living for the next life. I feel like, what can we do here in this moment? How can we create here in this moment? That doesn't mean I don't believe there's an afterlife or anything like that. Here's the thing. I don't fucking know. And no one else does. And if they try to tell you that they do, they're lying or they're delusioned. So I think that there are some beautiful stories that can help us to understand some of what could be possible. But death is the ultimate mystery, and the ultimate humility around death is realizing that we don't know, and make the most of the time that you have now. I think that that's the thing, while doing no harm. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't make the best of your time by, hurting other people or taking advantage of people, right? So,
Ooh, Chris Lloyd. Is that your friend William?
Oh yeah, hi Chris.
Hi, Chris. He said, didn't Betty White say that? Ooh, there's a Betty White quote hidden somewhere.
what was the Betty White quote?
I
Maybe tell us more, Chris.
Yeah, Chris, please tell us more. I hope you're still listening. Please share it.
Yeah, and Lisa's talking about feeling the gratitude, that an awareness of our mortality might bring as well. And I've had a lot of good conversations with Lisa around some of these issues. She's always someone who's thinking philosophically like that. But
ooh, death is a mystery. Okay,
yeah,
thanks, Chris.
it is the ultimate mystery, right? I mean, I think that's what's cool about it on some level too. Like, yeah, it's possible that there's, what we see in these mythological stories is judgment, or there's possible it's like a whole new dimension or something. I think that you could live as if that is true, and try not to do harm, right? Like, you don't want to be a total a-hole creating like negative karma, so that, like, let's say you are reincarnated and you have to come back and deal with the repercussions of the arrows that you shot in this lifetime. You might as well be a decent person. That's kind of where I fall on this. But at the same time, if you're denying the good that you can do now, or the, like, the experiences that you can have, the love that you can create, that's living in the negative fear, I think, as well, right? In the toxic fear.
Absolutely. And I think, just to maybe come full circle here, even though I feel like that film was incredibly cheesy at points, that's the one thing that really hit home for me, right? So these characters were constantly struggling with, right? Like, just, even that idea of like being able to predict someone's death, there was like, that was a whole other level in this film as well. But yeah, you had characters that were completely, like, their way of dealing with the fear was to avoid it. And then others, I feel like some of the main characters had to really deal with their own feelings of hopelessness to get over that, to be productive.
Right.
But I did love the ending, because ultimately nothing was answered.
Well, you had some people that chose to be hedonistic, right? And in response to knowing about their own pending mortality.
Yep.
You had some people that chose to repair relationships that may have been broken. You had people that chose to spend those final moments being present with one another, right? You had some other people that chose to, like, deny that the whole thing was even happening. Like, there's all sorts of human responses that we have to this knowledge. And you get to kind of, that's what you do get to choose, is how are you going to respond to the knowledge that you receive. And I think that's the real test of your character, is how do you respond when you are shown some truth? Are you going to deny it? Are you going to, like, become hedonistic in response to it? This is also Capricorn themes too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because there's a hidden hedonistic side to Capricorn, right? There's a hidden, like, lecherous side to it. I mean, one of the cards associated with Capricorn is the Devil card in the tarot, which is bondage to physical reality, or bondage to desire. So these are some of the questions we're going to ask ourselves: is, are we going to react to this with just, abandonment, or are we going to react to this with wisdom and with trying to maybe be the best version of ourselves, and treat others with compassion? I think that's, if you wanted to ask me, William, what I believe about the afterlife and all these things, I think it's just really simple. I think just treat others the way that you want to be treated. I keep coming back to the golden rule, right? And I think it's just such a beautiful, simple thing. Treat people with respect, and that's the way to do no harm, to me.
I agree. That's how I live my life. I try anyway.
And we fall short of the glory. Let me also say that I'm definitely not perfect with this, and that's why, even if you have a spiritual practice, it's a discipline, it's a practice, it's something you come to each day to try to to manifest in your life. It's not just you pray one time or whatever and you're done, or you or you treat someone nice one time and then, oh, you've done your good deed for the rest of your life. It's one little thing at a time, building small accumulation. That's another word for the hexagram number 9, small accumulation. So just do the little things each day, and we'll all get through this, I think, together. Fingers crossed. I do have hope that someday the challenges that we're experiencing now will change. I don't know if it's gonna. We'll always have challenges. That's part of being a human, but they'll be different. This too shall pass, I think, is another way you can think of these things.
Definitely.
I think that's a wonderful way to wrap things up, especially because I don't know why, but our video is starting to lag. Any final thoughts?
Breathe. I feel like that's the biggest thing that I've learned just in the past year. I've learned in these like uncertain moments, and I'm feeling the anxiety and I don't know what to do with it, because on one level you have your head and then you have your heart, and sometimes you have a hard time connecting those things, and you can get out of hand where your mind can go when things are so uncertain. And I just find breathing properly is a huge thing.
I love that. I agree. I think one day at a time, connect with, during this earthy retrograde, connect with your body, but also realize that you may be more than your body, even though we say that we don't truly know. But that's really the crux of faith, right? I think it doesn't matter what you have faith in. Sometimes we have to think about things that we can't see. And this is what's testing, this whole experience is testing our faith, because you can't see a virus. You can see the results of it, just like we can't see the divine, but we can see the results of it, around us, if that's something that you believe in. So I think that it's a test of faith. It's an ability to embrace the mystery, and just to, meet the moment with what is required and be present, stay in the moment. I think that is something I try to do with my spiritual practice. Like I really resonate with Taoism, and trying to just meet this present moment and not get too fixated on, the past or the future, and the eternity is in the present. I think that's the final thoughts I have on that.
I like that.
I love it. I think this has been a wonderful recap of the 40-day and 40-night Venus retrograde journey in Capricorn. I'm excited to touch base with both of you at the end of it to see what new structures we have put in place, what ways we have unearthed and reshaped our lives. And with that, I am CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac. This interconnect connection is driving me mad. I hope I can fix that by the next time we talk. I'm an astrologer, tarot reader. I make apothecary, but mostly I make these videos, and you can follow me at Art of the Zodiac or Accidental Zodiac. And I have been so honored to talk to both of you astrologers today, Spencer Michaud and William Holloway. Maybe starting with William first this time. Tell us a little bit about how people can keep in contact with you and what you have going on.
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at william.stanley.holloway. Might need to work on that handle. It's a little long. I just didn't want to have any numbers and dashes in it, so I put my entire full name. Anyway, that's the best way to find me for astrology content, and you can book readings with me through that. And the only thing I can say right now that I have coming up is I will be upping my prices in the next week. So I still have beginner prices, but I am going to have them come up pretty soon.
Fantastic. So what you're saying is book a reading with you this week before your prices jump. Get on it.
Yeah.
And Spencer, how can people follow up with you and what's going on?
Yeah, I have a few places people can find me. I have a YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology, where I do some live streams like this, and I have a full moon live stream coming up on January the 12th with Sam Bellier. That's a Wednesday. That's next Wednesday. You can find me at spencermichaud.com. I'm doing a Decans of Capricorn webinar on January the 15th, so there's still some spots available there if you'd like to sign up. And I also do readings as well. If you're trying to figure out what's going on for the new year, I do both 3 and 6 month ahead readings, where I like to do shorter sections of time because it helps us to be present and do actionable things rather than trying to digest too much of the year. So I have booking available for that. And I'm, if you haven't had a reading with me, it's great to do the natal reading, because what we do is we dive into your mythological stories that are, at work in your chart. And I always try to find actionable things for clients. It's almost kind of like a coaching session. And that's where you can find me. I'm on Instagram too, at Spencer Michaud. And that's what I've got. And thank you so much, CV, for having me today. And William, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun.
You're welcome. I will share our handles and everything in the YouTube comments as well. So if people miss that, they can reference the comment portion of this video. And with that, goodbye.
Bye.
Take care, friends.